A bride's hidden to Rosalust Montgomery stood frozen before the ornate mirror in her new bedchamber, watching candlelight flicker across her reflection with trembling hands. The white silk nightgown clung to her slender frame, and her auburn hair cascaded in waves down her back, carefully arranged by maids who whispered excitedly about wedding night traditions. But Celeste felt no excitement, only a crushing dread that threatened to steal her breath. Tonight she would become a wife in every sense, and the thought filled her with a terror she could barely contain. Before we begin, I kindly request that you please subscribe to my channel. Now, please share in the comments where you're watching from. The wedding had been beautiful by all accounts. St. Margaret's Cathedral overflowed with roses and lilac while London's finest society watched her marry Lord Theodore Ashford, the handsome Earl of Pemberton. Theodore was everything a woman could want, tall and broad-shouldered with warm hazel eyes and a genuine smile that reached them. He had been nothing but kind during their brief courtship, yet kindness from men always preceded something darker in Celeste's experience. She had learned this brutal lesson years ago. The gentle approachador entered their chambers quietly, still wearing his wedding waistcoat, though his jacket had been discarded. His presence filled the room, not with threat as Celeste expected, but with a strange calmness that only heightened her anxiety. She watched him through the mirror, seeing how his eyes softened when they met hers in the reflection. "You look absolutely breathtaking," Theodore said, his voice gentle and low. He approached slowly, giving her time to adjust to his presence. "Are you comfortable? I can have the maids bring more blankets if the room is too cold." Celeste's throat tightened. Why was he being so considerate? Every fiber of her being screamed that this gentleness was merely a prelude to violence. Yet Theodore simply stood there, patient and waiting. She forced herself to turn and face him directly, knowing she could not delay the inevitable forever. "I am fine. Thank you," she whispered, the words barely audible. Theodore noticed how she hugged herself protectively, how her green eyes darted toward the door as if calculating escape routes. He had seen that look before in wounded animals, that primal fear that speaks of past trauma. Something was deeply wrong, and he would not proceed until he understood what frightened his bride so thoroughly. "Celeste," he said, moving no closer, but kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. "I need you to know something very important. I will never, ever hurt you. What happens tonight, tomorrow, or any night of our marriage will only happen if you truly want it to. Your body belongs to you alone." Tears and truth, unexpected words, shattered something inside Celeste. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, and suddenly she was sobbing, months and years of suppressed fear pouring out. Theodore remained where he was, not rushing to comfort her uninvited, simply offering a handkerchief and waiting with infinite patience. "I am so afraid," Celeste finally gasped between sobs. "I know what happens between husbands and wives, and I know it will hurt, and I know you have every right to take what you want, but please, please be quick about it." Theodore's heart broke at her words. "Celeste, where did you learn these things? Who told you marriage must involve pain and taking?" She looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Miss Worthington, my governess. She said a wife's duty is to endure, to submit without complaint. She said men are cruel by nature, and that resistance only makes punishment worse. Did this Miss Worthington hurt you?" Theodore asked carefully, though he already suspected the answer. Celeste's silence spoke volumes. Her hands twisted the fabric of her nightgown, and fresh tears tracked down her face. Theodore felt rage building in his chest, not at this trembling woman before him, but at whoever had taught her to fear intimacy and submission. The scars revealed. "May I come closer?" Theodore asked, and when Celeste nodded hesitantly, he moved to sit beside her on the bed's edge. "Celeste, I promise you that what Miss Worthington told you are lies. Marriage should never involve pain or force. Intimacy between husband and wife should bring pleasure to both, or it should not happen at all. But everyone says the first time hurts," Celeste whispered. "There can be some discomfort," Theodore admitted honestly. "But that is why we go slowly, with care and patience, And we do not have to do anything tonight. We could simply talk, or sleep, or I could take another room entirely if that would make you feel safer. Celeste stared at him in disbelief. You would do that? Truly, of course. You are my wife, not my property. Your comfort and happiness matter more than my desires. Something shifted in Celeste's expression. The rigid fear softened slightly, replaced by cautious curiosity. Miss Worthington also said that men cannot control themselves, that once aroused they become animals. Then Miss Worthington knew nothing about real men or real love. Theodore said firmly, I am perfectly capable of controlling myself. I've been controlling myself since the moment I met you, because I wanted to be respectful during our courtship. For the first time, Celeste smiled slightly. You have been very proper. Too proper perhaps, Theodore said with a gentle smile of his own. I should have told you that I find you incredibly beautiful, that your smile makes my day brighter, that I count myself the luckiest man in London to have you as my wife. Celeste's breath caught. You truly think those things? I truly do. Theodore reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and took her hand in his. Will you tell me what Miss Worthington did to make you so afraid? Celeste hesitated, then slowly turned her back to him. With trembling fingers, she lowered the nightgown's neckline, revealing her shoulders and upper back. Theodore's sharp intake of breath told her he saw them, the crisscrossing scars that marked her skin, a map of old suffering, a promise of protection. She used a switch. Celeste whispered, whenever I failed to be perfectly obedient, perfectly silent, perfectly submissive, she said, she was preparing me to be a good wife, teaching me that pain follows disobedience. Theodore's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle. How old were you when this began? 8. After my mother died, my father hired Miss Worthington because she came highly recommended for producing well-mannered young ladies. Your father knew about this. Theodore could barely contain his rage. I do not think so. Miss Worthington only struck me where clothing would hide the marks, and I learned quickly not to cry or complain, because that brought worse punishments. Theodore carefully, reverently, traced one of the scars with his fingertip. Celeste flinched but did not pull away. These scars, he said softly, are evidence of your survival, not your shame. You endured something terrible, and yet you are still here, still strong enough to share this truth with me. That takes incredible courage. Celeste pulled her nightgown back up and turned to face him, her eyes searching his face for signs of disgust or rejection. Instead, she found only compassion and a fierce protectiveness that made her feel safer than she had in years. Miss Worthington will never touch you again, Theodore promised, and neither will anyone else who would harm you. You have my word as your husband, and as a man who is already falling deeply in love with you. The word love hung in the air between them, fragile and new, but unmistakably real. Celeste felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been frozen and locked away for so long. Perhaps, just perhaps, this marriage would not be the nightmare she had feared. Perhaps Theodore really was different. Perhaps she could learn to trust again. Morning light and new beginning. Celeste woke to sunlight streaming through silk curtains and the unfamiliar warmth of another person beside her. For a moment, panic seized her chest before memory returned. Theodore had kept his promise. After her confession, he had simply held her while she cried, then tucked her into bed and laid beside her on top of the covers, maintaining careful distance. She had fallen asleep to the sound of his steady breathing, feeling safer than she had in years. Now, watching him sleep in the golden morning light, Celeste studied her husband properly for the first time without fear clouding her vision. Theodore's face was peaceful in sleep, his dark hair falling across his forehead. There was strength in the line of his jaw, kindness in the curve of his mouth. This was the man who had promised to protect her, who had chosen her comfort over his own desires. Theodore's eyes opened, immediately finding hers. Good morning, he said softly. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in years, Celeste admitted. Thank you for staying with me. There is nowhere else I would rather be. Theodore sat up carefully, maintaining the respectful distance between them. I thought today we might spend time together. properly getting to know one another. No expectations, no pressure. Just a people learning to be friends, as well as spouses. Friendship before romance. Seth, following weeks, transformed Celeste's understanding of marriage entirely. Theodore courted her within their own home, bringing her flowers from the garden, reading poetry aloud in the library, teaching her to play chess in the evenings. He introduced her to his favorite places on the estate, walked with her through blooming orchards, and listened with genuine interest as she shared her own thoughts and dreams. I always wanted to paint, Celeste confessed one afternoon as they sat by the lake, but Miss Worthington said creative pursuits led to vanity and disobedience. The next morning, Theodore had an entire artist's studio prepared in the East Wing, complete with canvases, paints, and brushes of every kind. Celeste stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face as she realized he had truly listened, truly cared about her happiness. Paint whatever brings you joy, Theodore said, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. This space is yours alone. Celeste turned and, for the first time, initiated contact. She rose on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to Theodore's cheek. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me as a person, not just a wife. Theodore's eyes darkened with emotion. You are the most remarkable person I have ever met, Celeste, strong and brave and beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with your appearance. Awakening Desiree's trust grew between them. Celeste found herself noticing things about Theodore that made her pulse quicken. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he reached for books on high shelves. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. The gentle strength of his hands when he helped her from carriages. Feelings she had thought destroyed by Miss Worthington's cruelty began stirring to life. One evening, as Theodore read aloud in the library, Celeste found herself studying his mouth instead of listening to the words. When he noticed her staring, he set the book aside. Celeste, is something wrong? She bit her lip, gathering courage. I have been thinking about what you said on our wedding night, about intimacy bringing pleasure instead of pain. Theodore's expression grew serious. Yes, I think I would like to understand what that means, with you. Her cheeks flushed pink. If you still want me, despite knowing about my past. Theodore crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt before her chair. Celeste Montgomery Ashford, I have wanted you since the moment I first saw you, but I need to know you are truly ready. That this is what you want, not what you think you should want. I am ready, Celeste said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I trust you, Theodore. You have shown me every day that I can trust you. The first touch of lover Theodore led Celeste to their bedchamber, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. He lit candles slowly, giving her time to change her mind, watching her face for any signs of fear. When he saw only nervous anticipation, he approached her with reverence. We will go very slowly, he promised, and if at any moment you feel uncomfortable or want to stop, you simply say so. There will be no consequences, no anger, no disappointment. Do you understand? I understand. Theodore began with simple touches, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, brushing through her auburn hair. Each caress was gentle, asking permission, building trust. When he finally kissed her, it was soft and sweet, nothing like the brutal claim she had been taught to expect. Celeste melted into the kiss, her hands tentatively reaching up to rest on Theodore's chest. She could feel his heart pounding, could sense his desire held carefully in check. The knowledge that he wanted her, but would never take more than she offered, made her feel powerful and safe simultaneously. More, she whispered against his lips. Theodore smiled and kissed her deeper, his tongue gently exploring. Celeste gasped at the new sensation, heat pooling low in her belly. This was desire, she realized. This warm, aching need was what people wrote songs about, what made poets compose verses. Theodore's hands moved to the laces of her dress, pausing. May I? Yes. He undressed her slowly, reverently, pausing to kiss newly revealed skin. When he reached the scars on her back, he pressed gentle kisses to each one, transforming marks of pain into something cherished. Celeste found herself crying again, But these were tears of healing, not fear. You are so beautiful, Theodore murmured against her skin. Every part of you, breaking through fear when they finally came together. Theodore kept his promise. There was brief discomfort, but no real pain, and he moved with such care and patience that soon pleasure replaced any lingering unease. Celeste discovered that her body was capable of sensations she had never imagined, waves of warmth and tingling that built and built until she cried out in surprised delight. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Celeste traced patterns on Theodore's chest that was nothing like what Miss Worthington described. That is because Miss Worthington was wrong about everything, Theodore said firmly. Love between husband and wife should be mutual joy, not submission and hindrance. Celeste snuggled closer, feeling cherished and safe. For the first time in her adult life, she felt truly free from the shadows of her past. Theodore had given her the greatest gift imaginable by showing her that not all men were cruel, that touch could heal instead of harm, that love was real and not just a fairy tale. An unwelcome letter 3 weeks into their marriage. During breakfast, a letter arrived that made Celeste's blood run cold. The handwriting on the envelope was painfully familiar. What is it? Theodore asked, noticing how her hands trembled. It is from Miss Worthington. Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. She wants to visit, to see how I am settling into married life. She says it is her duty, as my former governess, to ensure I am behaving appropriately. Theodore's expression turned to stone. He took the letter from Celeste's shaking hands and read it, his jaw tightening with each line. The audacity of this woman, believing she still had any right to insert herself into Celeste's life, made him see red. She will not be visiting, Theodore said with quiet finality, and she will never contact you again. But she might tell people things, spread rumors about me being disobedient or ungrateful, Celeste said, old fears rising. Theodore cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me, my darling. That woman has no power over you anymore. She cannot hurt you. I will not allow it. Confronting the monster that afternoon, Theodore ordered his carriage prepared. He would visit Miss Worthington himself, make absolutely clear that she was to leave his wife alone forever. Celeste wanted to accompany him, to face her former tormentor, but Theodore insisted she stay home. You have nothing to prove, he told her gently. You have already survived her cruelty. Let me handle this. Theodore arrived at Miss Worthington's modest townhouse in an unfashionable part of London. The governess who answered the door was exactly as he imagined, thin and severe with cold eyes that held no warmth. She smiled obsequiously when she recognized the Earl of Pemberton. My lord, what an honor. I assume you received my letter. I do hope dear Celeste is proving to be a satisfactory wife. I trained her myself. You know, trained her. Theodore's voice was dangerously quiet. Is that what you call beating a child with a switch? Terrorizing her, teaching her that pain and submission are all she deserves. Miss Worthington's smile faltered. I do not know what lies Celeste has told you, but I assure you, my discipline was always appropriate and necessary. The girl was willful and required firm guidance. The girl was 8 years old when you began abusing her, Theodore said, his control barely maintained. I have seen the scars you left on her back. There is no justification for what you did. A husband has the right to discipline his wife as he sees fit, Miss Worthington said primly. I was simply preparing Celeste for that reality. Theodore stepped closer, his height and presence suddenly intimidating. You will listen very carefully to what I am about to say. You will never contact my wife again. You will never speak her name to anyone. If I hear that you have spread even the slightest rumor or innuendo about her, I will use every resource at my disposal to destroy you. I will expose your cruelty to every family in London. I will ensure you never work again. Do you understand me? Miss Worthington paled. You would not dare. My reputation is impeccable. Then keep it that way by staying far away from Celeste. Theodore turned to leave, then paused. And Miss Worthington, if you ever raise your hand to another child in your care, I will know about it, and I will make certain you face consequences. He left her standing in shocked silence, satisfaction warming his chest. Celeste would never have to fear that woman again. Freedom celebrate. When Theodore returned home, he found Celeste in her studio, painting. She turned when she heard him enter, setting down her brush with paint-stained fingers. "Is it done?" she asked. "It is done. She will never bother you again." Celeste crossed the room and wrapped her arms around Theodore's waist, pressing her face against his chest. "Thank you for fighting for me. No one has ever fought for me before." Theodora held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I will always fight for you, Celeste. You are my wife, my partner, and the woman I love more than life itself." She looked up at him, her green eyes shining. "Make love to me, Theodore, right here, right now. I want to replace old fears with new memories." Theodore captured her mouth in a passionate kiss, backing her toward the settee in the corner of the studio. They came together urgently, celebrating her freedom, their love, and the beautiful future that stretched before them. A wife transformed 6 months into their marriage. Celeste barely recognized the woman she had become. Gone was the frightened, trembling bride who had stood before the mirror on her wedding night. In her place stood a confident woman who laughed freely, spoke her mind, and pursued her passions without apology. Her paintings had become quite accomplished, and Theodore had arranged for several to be displayed in a London gallery under a pseudonym. The exhibition was well received, with critics praising the emotional depth and technical skill. When Celeste revealed herself as the artist, society was shocked that an earl's wife would pursue such endeavors, but Theodore stood proudly beside her, making it clear he supported his wife's talents completely. "You have changed me," Celeste told Theodore one evening as they prepared for bed. "You have shown me that I am more than what was done to me, that I deserve happiness and respect." Theodore pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You changed yourself, my darling. I simply provided a safe space for you to bloom. The strength was always inside you." Giving Baxel's transformation inspired her to help other women escaping difficult situations. She began volunteering at a charitable organization that provided shelter for women fleeing abusive homes. Many of the women she met reminded her of her younger self, frightened and beaten down, believing they deserved nothing better. One afternoon, Celeste met a young woman named Jane, who had recently escaped her employer's household after years of mistreatment. Jane's back bore scars similar to Celeste's own, and when their eyes met, an understanding passed between them that needed no words. "Does it get better?" Jane asked quietly. "The fear, the nightmares, the feeling that you are broken beyond repair." Celeste took Jane's hands in hers. "It does get better, not immediately, and not without effort, but with time and support and the willingness to believe you deserve better. Yes, it gets better. I am living proof of that." She shared her own story with Jane, holding nothing back. She spoke of Miss Worthington's cruelty, of her terror on her wedding night, of how Theodore's patience and love had slowly helped her heal. By the time she finished, both women were crying, but these were tears of hope rather than despair. "If I can go from where I was to where I am now," Celeste said, "then anyone can heal. You just need people who believe in you and time to remember who you truly are beneath the wounds." Theodore provided funding to expand the shelter's capacity, and Celeste spent several days each week there, mentoring women and helping them discover their own strength. The work was emotionally challenging, but deeply fulfilling. Each woman she helped felt like a victory over Miss Worthington and everything that cruel woman represented. A new life beginning one spring morning. Celeste woke feeling decidedly unwell. The room spun when she tried to stand, and she barely made it to the wash basin before being violently sick. Theodore rushed to her side, holding her hair back and supporting her with strong, gentle hands. "Should I send for the physician?" he asked worriedly. "I do not think that will be necessary," Celeste said, a strange mixture of joy and trepidation filling her. "Theodore, I believe I might be with child." Theodore froze, then slowly turned her to face him. "Truly, we are going to have a baby." "I believe so. All the signs are there." A smile broke across Theodore's face, like sunshine after storm. He lifted Celeste and spun her around, laughing with pure joy before carefully setting her back down. "A baby, our baby. Celeste, you have made me the happiest man alive." The physician confirmed what Celeste already knew. She was approximately 2 months along, healthy and strong. The news filled the household with excitement, and Theodore became almost comically protective, insisting Celeste rest constantly and forbidding her from any activity he deemed even remotely strenuous. "Theodore, I am pregnant, not made of glass." Celeste laughed as he insisted on carrying her up the stairs. "Women have babies every day without their husbands treating them like fragile dolls. None of those women are my wife carrying my child," Theodore said stubbornly. "Indulge me, my darling. Let me take care of you." Facing old demands as her pregnancy progressed, Celeste found herself thinking often about her own childhood, about the mother she had lost and the father who had failed to protect her. One issue in particular weighed heavily on her mind. How would she raise a child differently than she had been raised? How would she ensure her own son or daughter never experienced the cruelty she had endured? She shared these fears with Theodore late one night as he held her in their bed, his hand resting protectively on her growing belly. "What if I do not know how to be a good mother?" she whispered. "Miss Worthington destroyed any example of nurturing could it have had. What if I accidentally hurt our child the way I was hurt?" Theodore tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "Celeste, the very fact that you're worrying about this proves you will be an excellent mother. You are kind, compassionate, and determined to do better than what was done to you. That is all any child needs. But what if I lose my temper? What if I become impatient or frustrated? Then you will take a breath, step away if needed, and handle the situation with the grace and wisdom I have watched you develop over these months. You are not Miss Worthington, Celeste. You could never be that cruel because cruelty is not in your nature." His words soothed her fears. Though she knew the work of breaking generational patterns would be ongoing, she made a solemn vow to herself and to the life growing inside her that her child would know only love, never violence, that discipline would come through gentle guidance, not punishment, that her son or daughter would grow up feeling safe and cherished every single day. A daughter's arrival on a crisp autumn morning, after many hours of labor, Celeste gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The moment the midwife placed the squirming, crying infant in her arms, Celeste felt a love so profound it took her breath away. This tiny person, with Theodore's hazel eyes and Celeste's auburn hair, was perfect in every way. "Hello, my darling girl," Celeste whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Welcome to the world. I promise you will always be safe, always be loved, always be free to be exactly who you are meant to be." Theodore sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Celeste's shoulders, staring at their daughter with wonder. "She's perfect, absolutely perfect. What should we name her?" Celeste had been thinking about this for months. "Grace," she said softly, "because she represents the grace we have been given, the second chance to do things right, to build a family based on love instead of fear." "Grace Ashford," Theodore said, testing the name. "It is perfect. Building a new legacy. The years that followed were the happiest of Celeste's life." Grace grew into a spirited, confident child who knew nothing of fear or pain. When she was naughty, Celeste spoke to her calmly, explaining consequences and teaching lessons through patience rather than punishment. It was harder work than simple discipline through fear, but watching Grace blossom into a secure, loving child made every challenging moment worthwhile. 2 years after Grace's birth, Celeste gave birth to twin boys, James and Thomas. The household became wonderfully chaotic, filled with laughter and noise, and the constant energy of 3 young children. Theodore proved to be a devoted father, spending hours playing with the children, reading them stories, teaching them to ride horses and fish at the estate's lake. Celeste continued her work with the women's shelter, now bringing her children along sometimes, so they could see the importance of helping others. Grace, even at age 5, showed remarkable empathy, sharing her toys with children at the shelter and asking thoughtful questions about why some people needed help. "You were teaching her compassion," Theodore observed one evening, She will grow up understanding that privilege comes with responsibility. I want her to know that her voice matters, that she has power to change things, Celeste said. Everything Miss Worthington tried to destroy in me, I want to nurture in grace. I want her to be strong and kind and unafraid. A final confrontation in Grace was 6 years old. Celeste received unexpected news. Miss Worthington had fallen ill and was not expected to recover. She was asking to see Celeste one final time. Celeste's first instinct was to refuse. She owed that woman nothing, certainly not a deathbed visit. But Theodore suggested that perhaps seeing Miss Worthington one last time, as the strong, healed woman she had become, might provide closure. You do not have to go, Theodore said. But if you choose to, I will be right beside you. Celeste thought about it 4 days before deciding. She would go, not to forgive, but to show Miss Worthington exactly what she had failed to destroy. She would go as proof that cruelty does not win, that love and patience and courage can heal even the deepest wounds. They found Miss Worthington in a charity hospital, thin and pale, her severity softened by illness. When she saw Celeste enter, her eyes widened. You came, the old woman rasped. I did. Celeste stood tall, Theodore's supportive presence behind her. Not because you deserve my time, but because I wanted you to see what I have become despite everything you did to break me. I only wanted to prepare you, Miss Worthington said weakly. The world is cruel to women. I thought if I made you strong through hardship, you would survive. You did not make me strong, Celeste said firmly. You tried to destroy me. I became strong in spite of you, not because of you, and I have dedicated my life to ensuring other women endure what you put me through. She told Miss Worthington about her work at the shelter, about her 3 healthy children being raised with love and gentleness, about the happiness she had found with Theodore. With each word, she saw understanding dawn in the old woman's eyes, the realization that her methods had been not just wrong, but catastrophically harmful. I see now, Miss Worthington whispered. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. Can you ever forgive me? Celeste considered the question carefully. I do not know if I can forgive you for the years of pain and fear, but I can tell you that I have healed. I have found love and joy and purpose. You tried to bury me, but you only planted seeds. I grew despite the darkness you tried to keep me in. She turned and walked away, Theodore's hand warm in hers. She never looked back. Miss Worthington died 3 days later, and Celeste felt nothing but relief that another child would never fall victim to that woman's twisted beliefs. A love that transforms on their 10th wedding anniversary. Theodore and Celeste hosted a grand ball at their estate. As Celeste descended the main staircase in a stunning emerald gown, Theodore waited at the bottom, his eyes filled with the same love and admiration she saw there every day. Have I told you today how much I love you? He asked, taking her hand. Only twice, Celeste teased. You are falling behind. They danced together as their guests looked on, moving perfectly in sync after years of partnership. During the waltz, Theodore pulled her closer and whispered, Do you remember our wedding night? How frightened you were. I remember, Celeste said. I also remember how patient and kind you were. How you showed me that love does not have to hurt. Look at what we have built together, Theodore said, gesturing to their home, their laughing children playing in the corner under the watchful eyes of their doting nanny. Their friends gathered in celebration. This is what love creates. Not pain, not fear, but joy and family and a future worth living. Celeste blinked back tears. You saved me, Theodore. No, my darling, he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. We saved each other. I was lonely and lost before you. You gave my life meaning and purpose. We healed together. That night, after their guests had departed, and their children were tucked safely in bed, Celeste and Theodore stood on their balcony looking out over the moonlit estate. Theodore's arms wrapped around her from behind, and Celeste leaned back against his chest, feeling utterly content. I never imagined I could be this happy, she said softly. That night so long ago, standing in my chambers terrified of what was to come, I could not have dreamed that 10 years later I would be here, loved and safe and whole, "You deserve every bit of happiness you have found," Theodore said, "and I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that." Celeste turned in his arms and kissed him deeply, passionately, with all the love and gratitude and desire that filled her heart. Their love story had begun with fear and scars, but it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. She had learned that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that love, real, patient, gentle love, could conquer even the darkest past dots. As they returned to their bedchamber hand in hand, Celeste knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, in Theodore's arms, in this home they had built together, surrounded by the family and life they had created. Her scars would always be part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She was Celeste Ashford, beloved wife, devoted mother, passionate artist, an advocate for women's safety. She was strong, healed, and deeply, wonderfully happy, and that happiness, born from patience and trust and genuine love, was the greatest victory of all.